healing, history, and story. Most people hear healing and think it's about the body. They think about herbs, food, rest, nervous system, emotion, trauma, maybe even pills and potions. They think about what hurts right now and what can be done about it to make it better. When hearing the word history, they might think about something old, like dates, wars, documents, names in the courthouse records, people who lived long before us, the things that happened back then. And then there's the word story. There's books, movies, fairy tales, something told around campfires, something we read for entertainment, comfort, or escape. But I don't believe those three things are separate at all. I think healing, history, and story are three strands of the same cord, braided together as one. When you start pulling on one side, the others move too. Because healing is not just about what hurts us today. Healing is asking where the hurt begins. It asks what shapes us, asks what we learned to survive, what we inherited, what we were taught to ignore, and what we keep carrying because nobody ever stopped long enough to name it. History helps answer those questions. Not the dry, dusty version of history where everybody acts like the past is just some stack of facts sitting in sensible shoes. I mean real history, lived history, the kind of history that happens in the kitchens, gardens, churches, in the fields, the markets, ports, in the bedroom. History that is marriages and births and deaths and migrations. There's land disputes, family secrets, hard choices. That kind of history does not stay locked in the textbook. It moves through families. It shapes how people love, how they grieve, how they protect themselves, raise their children, how they avoid certain subjects, carry pride or shame, how they decide who belongs and who doesn't. That is why history matters to healing, because sometimes what we call a personal problem did not start with us personally. Sometimes it is a family pattern. Sometimes it is a community wound. It could be the silence that got passed down so many times that everybody forgot where it even started or what the story is beneath it. And that is where story comes in. Story is that bridge. Story takes history out of the file cabinets and puts breath back into it. Story lets us feel what the records can only point towards. Story gives the bones flesh, and healing gives the story purpose. That is why story can become medicine. Not because it magically fixes anything. Story heals because it gives us a language to what has been buried. Healing is not staying trapped in what happened either. It is learning how to tell the truth without letting the wound become the only story. That is rooted healing. That is the kind of healing that does not float off into fantasy or get stuck into bitterness. It keeps its feet in the dirt. It asks better questions. Where did this begin? Who taught us this? Who benefits from the silence? And who keeps the family alive? That is where history and story becomes powerful together, because history gives us the evidence, but story helps us to understand the humanity. And healing helps us decide what we are going to do with that understanding. And that is where healing begins. That is why I'm writing stories of the Catalina's daughters. Why I started with Ma Fille. It is the kind of story that grows out of history and hurt. When I started writing it, I was not just trying to tell a pretty historical story. I'm trying to understand the world of Mobile, Alabama, not as a place on the map, but as the living, breathing place with layers and layers of history. French, Spanish, African, Native, Creole, Catholic, Southern, complicated, beautiful, painful, stubborn, and deeply alive history in a place that still breathes it today. Mobile is one of those places where the past does not feel gone. You can walk through the streets and feel something that is still speaking under the surface. You can look at old maps and land records and realize that's what we call history was once somebody's daily life. Somebody walked to the local market. Somebody was baptizing a child. Someone signed a document that they may or may not have understood or even trusted. Somebody was burying their mother. Somebody else was trying to protect some land. Someone was trying to keep the family together in a world that kept shifting under their feet like quicksand. And when you start seeing history that way, it stops being a timeline. It is no longer dates on a piece of paper. It becomes people. That is what I wanted inside the world of Catalina's Daughters. That explanation is the start of what Ma Fille, ironically enough, the word for my daughter in their world. I want the readers to feel the history was not just happening around some character in a book. I wanted it to happen through them. It was shaping their choices, their fears, their relationships, their silence, their loyalty, their resentments, love, and even the way they understood themselves. Because that is how history works in real life. We like to act like we are brand new people who just pop up out of nowhere with our own ideas, our own personalities, but we are carrying so much more than that. We carry family patterns, regional memories. We carry the things our grandparents survived and never explained. We carry the things our communities adopt because they had no other choice. We carry the pride, the shame, the survival strategies that may have once saved somebody, but now might be choking the life out of us. Now, Ma Fille is connected to the history of the Mobile Creoles. Mobile Creole history is not some tiny footnote sitting politely in the corners of American history. It is central. It is older than the country itself, and it deserves to be seen with depth. The Mobile Creole world is not simple. It is not easy to define in a clear little box that people love to use now. It was language, faith, family, land, traditions, color, class, survival, reputations, and belonging that is all tangled together into one. It is French names and Catholic records. It is free people of color and enslaved people. It's white families and mixed families, Native connections, and Gulf Coast trade network. It is kinship with tension. It is beauty and harm, living to get too close together, because that's what history usually is when you stop polishing it for school books. And that is why I write historical fiction, because fiction lets us get close to the human truth. A document can tell you someone owned land. A baptism record can tell you a child was born. A court case can tell you that there was a dispute. But a story asks, what did that feel like? What did it feel like to belong but be told you do not belong at the same time? What did it feel like to be a daughter in a family where love was real but silenced outside the home? What did it feel like to stand in a place where people have history but someone else holds the pen and chooses to negate your story? That's where Ma Fille starts. It lives in the space between the records, between what was written and what has been remembered through other ways. Ma Fille, my daughter. That phrase carries tenderness, but it also carries protection, expectation, and inheritance. A daughter is loved, yes, but a daughter is also shaped. She is watched and taught what is acceptable. She is handed the family's hopes and sometimes the family's burdens before she is even old enough to know what she is holding. That is not just historical, it is human. Women have always carried the emotional archive of a family. We remember what happens in the kitchen. We remember the stories behind the lands, the names, the photographs, and the silence. That is part of the healing inside of Ma Fille. It is not healing like everything gets wrapped up in a neat little bow and everybody suddenly acts right. Why historical fiction? Some people know exactly where they come from. Some have fragments, and then there are some that silence was so loud that they now know nothing about their own history. I am interested in the people who lived through history without knowing they were living through it, and now history is trying to erase the fact that they ever existed at all. That is where the real story lives. So now that you see healing, history, and story have connections, what is your story? Leave it in the comment section. Are you interested in my historical fiction, Ma Fille? Check out the details below. And until next time, my friends, peace.